Well, good morning, and I'm here with Leah Mermelstein, and Lee has been a literacy consultant and founder of Read Write Connect. Back in the day, I think I might have actually uh, done some things with you way back in the day,
Yes, we're both old.
in another time and place. So, just an amazing, amazing person, and for those of you that know that the reading writing connection is important, this is someone you got to listen to. So, Lee, let's start out by you telling us a little bit about your background and take it away.
Oh, Sam, thank you so much for having me. And I'd love to share a little bit about my background. So I'm old. I've been working in education for over 30 years now. I started as a classroom teacher, teaching first grade and third grade. And now I partner with schools as a consultant, both nationally and internationally. And so I've had the just amazing privilege working alongside educators at every level. I work with teachers, I work with coaches, I work with administrators and district leaders, and I think that gives me a kind of a unique perspective on what's working, where the challenges are, and how to navigate those complexities that come with improving literacy instruction. And I really do feel like those day-to-day experiences help me stay grounded in both the big picture and the details. I'm not a formal researcher, but I do consider myself a bridge between research and practice. And as you know, Sam, every school has its own culture. They have their own resources, they have their own curriculum. So one of my, big things I try to do is just to be flexible and responsive and be responsive. And recently, in the past 2 or 3 years, I've added tutoring to my work. And this has really given me some other deeper insights because it really allows me to see firsthand how curriculum impacts individual students. And it's been a really great reminder of how important it is to balance that big picture with the small details. And finally, I've authored 5 books on instructional literacy, focusing on the strong connection, like you said, between reading and writing.
Oh, okay. Well, amazing. And my ears perked up when you talked about tutoring. Personally, I've always found that the things that you learn tutoring one-on-one
Mhm.
move into the classroom so easily. So it kind of gives you, it's almost like a little test case of what works and what doesn't work and
So
how
true.
to say things. And sometimes the kids will say things that in kid talk that say it much better than us grown-ups do.
Absolutely. Sam, I so agree. I feel like tutoring has helped me with consulting, and consulting has helped me with tutoring. It's been a really amazing experience.
Okay, well, let's get into the first question. And oh, this is a big one. What do you think of the current state of literacy? Oh my gosh, did I really ask that? Yes,
You
I
really did. So,
did.
Sam, I have, as you can probably guess, I have mixed feelings about the current state of literacy, but I'd like to begin with the positive because that's the part I can control. There's so much I can't control, but what I can control are the schools I partner with. And so in the schools I work with, we approach literacy as a nuanced dialogue. Instead of a one-size-fits-all model, we explore different paths to reach common outcomes. And my method today, yesterday, 25 years ago, has always been that thought about thoughtful, nuanced dialogue. And for me, the national conversation has positively, absolutely influenced my work in schools in positive ways. And because of this, the schools I partner with really take a varied approach. Some have adapted. They were doing workshop models and they are continuing to do workshop models, but they've adapted them. Some have changed models completely and it's worked for them. Some have purchased new resources and others have revisited the ways that they use existing resources. And the key to me is to make decisions with thoughtfulness, not quickly, aligning to research, and above all, continually measuring impact. So those are the positive things. What are my concerns? I'm concerned, and I know that I've heard you say similar things when meaningful dialogue is absent from the literacy conversation, or when terms like science of reading or science of writing or balanced literacy are thrown around to mean anything and everything. For example, Approaches like the workshop model might not always be aligned with research, but they might be. And I think the exact same thing can be true of what people call the science of reading and the science of writing. And I'm equally concerned when educators on all sides cling to one method or approach without openness to growth, because when we do this, we miss opportunities there to create a stronger impact. And I'm going to just use one quick example here. Decodable text. And that's something that has been a big growing point for me over the past 10 years. I see some people dismissing them completely, saying they're boring or they're unnecessary or they aren't aligned to research, which there is some truth to that. But I always suggest to people, instead of rejecting them outright, we need to ask, how can we use them to give students deliberate practice? And deliberate practice is aligned to research in lifting the words off the page more efficiently and more effectively. And to me, I think it's less about rigidly following methods of one way or the other, and more about asking, are we truly serving all of our students? And when we see ways that we possibly could serve them better, and again, we may not be sure, but I feel like when we wonder if we could, we need to stop fighting and just try it and see what happens.
Well, what you just said about decodables is kind of music to my ears. Uh, a lesser known person is Julia Armstrong, and a much more a better known person is Heidi Besmer. But in both cases, they have decodable texts out there that have some meat to them. They uh, are they have pots, and they're done in a way and in a language that promotes things. So I certainly see those that reject decodable text as, oh no, we can't do that. It really depends on how you implement it. And when you look for the best of the best people trying to write it in the very best way, you'll find things out there, as you well know. So
Yeah, and Sam, I would add to that too, that when you see how they change students, when we see, I was just doing a decodable text with a little boy who's a beginning first grader, and what I would have viewed as somewhat boring, he found hysterical and was laughing, and the extreme joy he got from being able to lift the words off the page. So I think it goes back to that question of not about what we like or what another teacher likes, but are they serving our students?
okay. Well, that's a great segue into the next question, uh, which is um, what have you learned in this national conversation, and how has it shifted or reaffirmed your work? So when you're out, and you're out there in the trenches, you're you were teaching for the longest time. You're a teacher of teachers. You know the research really well. Uh, so you're out there helping to create that national conversation. How has what's going on shifted and reaffirmed your work?
Yeah, great. I love that question because I really feel like there have been a few key lessons for me that have shifted, and some things that have remained the same. So kind of circling back to that conversation about decodable text, that one of the things has really shifted for me in the past 10 years, and this goes back to watching impact with students. So when I'm working with beginning readers, and notice I'm saying beginning readers, both research and my own experiences in school, especially when I've been tutoring students, have shown me that generally the most effective approach involves helping students when they're early on decoding words by saying the sound and then reading the word. In that way, they're orthographically mapping that word and moving those words faster into their long-term memory. I want to share a story that happened to me last year. And it kind of goes along with this idea of dialogue rather than fighting. So for example, I was in a classroom last year modeling a lesson, a small group work for a group of teachers, and the student I was working with came across the word nap in her decodable text, and she literally froze. Even though I knew from looking at the talking to the teacher, she'd been taught all those sounds during phonics instruction. So instead of encouraging her to look at the picture and get her mouth ready for that first sound, which I absolutely would have done 10 years prior, I asked her to simply say the sounds and read the word. And then she said, nap. And a huge smile came over her face. But what was interesting is that teaching encounter led to a very in-depth and very passionate conversation during my debriefing session with the teachers, because that's not what the teachers who are watching would have done in their own classrooms. But because I approach this as a dialogue, not as a, now you all have to do decodable text. We approach it as a, let's see what happens. Let's try it. Let's try thinking about what would happen if you simply said to children, say the sounds and read the words. And that shift in instruction led to the strongest data and foundational skills those teachers had ever seen. And the other thing kind of connected to that is what they found is that when they took the straightest path possible for reading the words, it opened the doors for more time to work on things such as listening and reading comprehension and writing composition. So all parts of literacy improved, as well as at least partially because they had more time for them. But my experiences in research suggest it's nuanced. So I want to kind of share two other examples that go along with that. So last week I was tutoring a first grader and he got to the word am and he struggled. He was saying the sounds. He was saying and that short A sound can slightly shift when it's followed by that nasal It's important for me to know about nasal sounds, but Henry just needs to be able to read the word. And that's when set for variability comes in. I just said to him, he looked at me kind of strangely. I said, well, does that sound like a word you know? And he kind of read the rest of the sentence. He said, am. And they're set for variability. And I want students early on to think in that way. Does that word sound like something I know? And can I pronounce it differently and see if it makes sense? So another example, just kind of the nuance in this, and this is something I've always known. I was tutoring a first grader, and it was mid-year last year, and I was instructing her in authentic texts. And she was reading a book, and it had the word freckles in it. And she had not been taught how to read words with more than one syllable. She hadn't been taught about the LE syllable, but she still read the word freckles with ease. And when I looked at her writing, she still spelled similar words easily as well. And there shares self-teaching theory in action. She taught herself through the act of reading and writing. She didn't learn those things through explicit systematic instruction. And that's something I've always known since I was a baby teacher, that students don't have to learn everything explicitly. They need to learn enough to figure out the rest through reading and writing.
You just tripped something for me. Mark Seidenberg kind of turned heads lately by saying that while we do need that explicit instruction early on, just exactly like you were talking about, that eventually we have to get them ready to take off. And the shift goes to exactly what you're talking about, using that set for variability. In the old days, we might have called it self-extending systems, but learning to teaching themselves how to read. And that is something that does happen. But the key here is that you need to do both. You need to have that direct, explicit early on, and then you need to be ready to have them take off and do that kind of self-teaching. So I'm springing that on you. Any comments on that before I move on?
Yeah, I think that, what I find in my schools and my experiences, the way that we truly serve students is to think about when different things are best for different students. Like, when is it the right time in a child's literacy development to do decodable text? Very early on. When is the best time to really be thinking about set for variability and share self-teaching theory as they begin to learn more? And again, part of that is also looking at individual students. So that's when the power of being in classrooms with teachers and kids, having nuanced conversations about, did what I just do serve that student. And so the questions I'm constantly asking when I'm in the classroom is, what are students learning? How do you know? What are their confusions? What could we do to untangle those confusions? And so to me, it's not about, going on social media and declaring one thing is debunked or something else is debunked. It is about letting the research and letting research around deliberate practice, letting research around shared self-teaching theory, set for variability, letting that guide the work I do in schools, and let it serve students, because what we want to do is we want kids to learn to read in the most effective, efficient ways possible.
Okay. Now, um, I think that's a perfect segue into the next question, which is, what do you think students need to do in order to see positive growth in literacy? And I think you've already answered some of that, but I'll give you a chance to expand.
Yes. Well, I think the first thing is, if schools want to see positive growth, and we should all want to see positive growth, even if we're, doing pretty well, we should want to think about ways to do better. But I think the first thing to do is we need to really assess our current systems with honesty and openness. So there's that dialogue. We need to look to see how is writing in our school? How is decoding in our school? How is comprehension in our school? How is oral language in our school? And so we need to begin with that evaluation of both practices and our resources. For example, in one district I'm partnering with this year, as they looked at data, they discovered gaps in vocabulary development, and they saw that that was interfering with comprehension and writing across all subjects. So before jumping to a solution, we took time to understand that gap. And then we began to think about resources and curriculum that would leverage those either existing resources or new resources while we addressed that gap. And then once we had that clear understanding of what that gap was, we've started to focus on instruction. And I strongly believe in PD that involves real students in the classrooms, because it allows you to see that in action. So I just came back from a week of being in classrooms with K-6 teachers, where we took some of those gaps we saw and we were trying instruction in the classroom. With some of it, I was modeling. With others, I was coaching. But to me, the most important work is that work in classrooms where you're asking those key questions. What are kids learning? How do you know? What are their confusions? How do you know? And what can we do to untangle those confusions? So 30 years ago when I went into classrooms, I used to think of it as a model lesson, and I was kind of going in to show teachers how you do it. And I do it really, really differently now. That it's not about me, and it's not about me coming in with some fancy lesson. It's about watching kids in the act of learning and in the act of confusion, and working together as a team to figure out those next steps. And throughout the process, that why also needs to remain clear. Positive impact happens when schools align their instruction with research, with understanding how research informs teaching, and along with their goal. So it's about really playing that long game, constantly revising curriculum based on student outcomes, and always, always, always with an eye on impact.
Okay, well, that again leads the perfect segue into the last little section, and that has to do with your resources. And I know we were talking before this began. The last time we talked, your book on the We Do had just come out, and now it's doing quite well, I'm sure. And and it for teachers that want to know about the reading writing connection and ask me about that, that's one of the things I send them to. So, including that, and besides that, what are some of the We Do writing and the self-directed writer support things that you have?
Thanks, Sam. So I'm always trying with all my resources. I try super hard to have simple tools for complex work. So my most recent book, We Do Writing, really helps schools to align their writing instruction with research, focusing on buckets such as language conventions, language composition, and application. And my We Do Writing, when I was writing the book, it wasn't out yet, but it kind of aligns beautifully with Duke and Cartwright's active view of reading. So I often use those two frameworks side by side in schools so that teachers can see it's not, we really are thinking about similar things in writing and in reading. And my We Do Writing framework also leverages the gradual release model. It leverages differentiated instruction to ensure that students are building skills without feeling overwhelmed. And my hope also is that the framework fits seamlessly into any writing curriculum or resources that you're using. So it provides teachers with the flexibility to meet their students where they are in whatever district they're in. And Self-Directed Writers is an older book. I think I wrote that when my daughter was born, and she's almost 12. But I actually have been thinking more about that book during this specific time period, because the conversation right now is so focused on skills and strategies. And this book focuses on nurturing independence and kind of essential soft skills like resilience and self-regulation. And that's our goal. The reason why we're teaching these skills and strategies is to help our kids become independent and help them with some of those soft skills. And those skills are so crucial for transfer, ensuring that students don't just perform in the moment, but they can apply those skills in future contexts. And I truly, truly believe that teachers have the power to inspire that kind of lasting impact when they really make plans on exactly how they'll nurture those soft skills during their lessons. And my third tool, which is my most recent kind of baby, is I have a literacy toolbox, which I've recently just revised and created a second edition. And what I aim to do with this toolbox is to give teachers and schools a simple tool to help them understand what the research says and what the research doesn't say, and then give people concrete ways to integrate that research into ongoing instruction and curriculum. And again, it's program agnostic. And so anybody can use this toolkit no matter how their district is handling the literacy conversation. It's filled with curated videos and articles, teaching and planning ideas. So I've found it super helpful for helping people kind of navigate this conversation.
Okay, and I'll make sure that there is if you'll send me those things that people that request them, I'll send them that entire list of things via email. So anything that we've missed now? Anything you'd like to say? Oh, I should have said that. He left that out. So any last thought? Any final thoughts here?
So I think I'm going to circle back to kind of the literacy conversation and kind of what I hope, and I feel hopeful because I see more and more of it, is just the importance of dialogue. And to remind ourselves, no matter where we are in this conversation, that it's not about being right, but it's really about positive change. And we need to really focus on, I feel like every conversation should have a child's story next to it, the impact it's having on students. And the moment we start looking at students, it starts requiring open-mindedness and a willingness to listen. And so in these dialogues, it's not just important to talk, but it's important to listen to both people who think differently to you, what the students are showing you, circling back to what you said earlier about how tutoring has utterly changed me, because you can't ignore what a student is showing you. And you can't say, I'm not going to try this with this student because that doesn't go along with my beliefs. There are always shades of gray in classroom practice. And my hope for the literacy conversation is that we honor that nuance. And again, I'm going to bring back those soft skills. They matter just as much as literacy skills. And again, my tutoring has shown me that. I was just working with a student yesterday, and one of his biggest things was his confidence and his risk taking. And yesterday he said to me, I don't know how to say a main idea sentence. And I said, you know what, Nolan, I believe in you. You can do this. We've been talking about this. And so and as we talked, he did it. And so that risk taking for him is just as important as the skills.
Okay, well, this has been enlightening, delightful. You've come a long way since the last time we talked, and you were already a long way at that point. So, thank you so much for doing this. There's one last tradition in a Bomarito interview. And it's
Uh-huh.
kind of a silly one, and you have to, I see you're already getting the big smile up there.
I love silly traditions.
Okay, and that silly tradition is the Zoom wave goodbye. So we've got to give our audience out
Is
there.
there a special Zoom wave, or can I make
Oh,
up my own?
well, but there isn't yet, but if you wanted to create one, go
No?
ahead.
Okay.
It's just waiting. And thank you so much. And that wraps it up.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Okay.